On today's show, AirPods 3rd generation are coming today, formal review coming up, why the Mac Mini is getting the M1 Pro and Max chips, and soon, what actually delayed the MacBook Pros until now, macOS Monterey is out, should you upgrade, and the M1 Max GPU is the fastest Affinity has ever tested. And I am iGaveDave, and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you. And if you want the latest Apple leaks, news and rumours every weekday at 12 UTC, like the video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. So let's get into it. We've got a bunch of stories. So AirPods 3rd generation, they're coming today. I'm very excited to see what Apple has got in store for us. Obviously, there's been some reviews out already. They're basically saying the sound quality is much better than it was on the previous generation, and people are saying they're as good as AirPods Pro, which is high praise indeed. Obviously, you're not getting the you're not going to get things like active noise cancellation. You're not getting the rubber tips, which is a plus or a minus depending on who you are, but we will see exactly how those perform in real life. So that will be coming up later today. Once they arrive, we'll be doing like an unboxing and a quick reaction to how they are. Next, there's been a few comments going on the channel saying why Apple probably isn't going to do a Mac Mini with the Pro chips and the Max chips. Now, I can't remember if I actually addressed this yesterday. It was such a big show that I just wanted to touch on it again. They are going to be coming. And we can tell this because Apple has still got on their website the Intel Core i5 6-core processor with Intel UHD graphics, those awful integrated graphics, and they're still charging like $400 more for that than you can buy the regular Apple Silicon one for, which outperforms this one. So they're keeping it there because they need to have a higher end version of the Mac Mini available, and what they've done in the past is they've always kept the previous ones around. If you look at the MacBook Pro page right now, there are no Intel options there. So the Intel options are basically still there as placeholders for the Apple Silicon stuff that hasn't been released yet. That's how we know that we are getting the Pro version of the Mac Mini. It will be coming soon. Apple was pushing to get it out for this event that's just happened. It didn't happen, and it does look like it's because they have so much to pack into that packaging. But we've got some new renders from Apple tomorrow for these, which is what's been on your screen throughout. They're coming. Mark my words, we will get the M1 Pro and M1 Max versions of the Mac Mini pretty soon. And this is a little tidbit, and this is kind of me doing a bit of detective work and piecing some things together. So again, take this with kind of a grain of salt, but let me know if you think this makes sense. The MacBook Pros that were delayed, we were expecting them in kind of April time, and I think there were some issues with the mini LED displays at that point, which is why they didn't come out then. Then we were expecting them at WWDC, which kind of everyone was expecting, and they didn't turn up, but Apple actually included M1X in the tags for WWDC. Now, that could have just been a very, very clever marketing move in order to get more clicks, or it could be that they really wanted to bring it out, but after the iPad Pros were released with the mini LED displays, there were so many complaints about the blooming effect that was happening on the displays that I think they kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit. Not completely redesigned, but readdressed things like the filter layers that go in between the backlight LEDs and the LCD layer that we look at, because by all accounts the blooming is far, far less pronounced. It's still evident if you're really looking for it, but it's far, far better than it was on those iPads Pro, and that's according to Dave 2D. Now, I think that once they were released and there were so many complaints of the blooming issues, I think that Apple kind of rethought it, had a little modification in there, and that's probably why we had a little bit more of a delay on these MacBook Pros. That's why I don't think they came out in June, but they came out now in October. My hope is that we might actually be changing that release schedule slightly from what I talked about a few days ago. So we would be looking at A-series chips in September, M-series chips in the spring, and then Pro chips at WWDC. That kind of makes sense in terms of what Apple would be looking to do, the right kind of market for who they're putting it out to, and then you can go back to your A-series chips in September, M-series chips in the spring, WWDC Pro chips. That would be a great cadence to have. I think that would make a lot more sense than what we have right now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Next up, Monterey is out. The The latest version of macOS Monterey, macOS 12, is out today. It's it came out yesterday, in fairness, but you can upgrade to it now. But should you? I think the answer is yes. If you have the capability, if your Mac is ready to do it, you should definitely do it. There are a few features that have not been released immediately, so things like universal control is not in there yet. It's going to be released, I would guess, fairly soon. And also some of the SharePlay features, I'm not sure if they're all activated right from the start, but we will be talking about that over the next few days once we've had time to kind of test the final release. If you have a Mac that is capable of running Monterey, you should absolutely upgrade to it. You're going to get the best security, the best compatibility, all that kind of stuff. There's no downside to doing it as far as we can tell. And finally, for the news segment, the M1 Max GPU is the fastest GPU Affinity has ever tested. If you don't know, Affinity is a suite of creative programs that come from the Serif company, who used to do loads of like creative stuff. They were kind of like Adobe, that kind of company. But Affinity's Andy Somerfield said, "The M1 Max is the fastest GPU we've ever measured in the Affinity by Serif photo benchmark. It outperforms the W9600X, a $6,000 300-watt desktop part, because it has immense compute performance, immense on-chip bandwidth, and immediate transfer of data on and off of the GPU. Unified memory architecture." So yes, we've been having benchmarks coming out. It looks like it's scoring around about 6,300, 6,200, 6,300 in metal, which is not quite as high as some people had expected. However, that's all about the actual compute, and there is an argument to be made that in real world usage, the speed of the bandwidth, the fact that you've got 400 gigabytes per second of bandwidth feeding the GPU, the fact that nothing has to be copied from the CPU to the GPU, so when you're actually using this in the real world and there's stuff moving between the two, that's when you're going to get these advantages. Some of the benchmarks will only be focusing purely on the GPU and not the interaction between the CPU and the GPU. So I think we're actually going to see much better performance in the real world than you've ever seen on anything else. It's absolutely mind-boggling what's happening here. So for anyone that was worried that we weren't getting enough graphics performance on this, I think you're probably safe. And also, when we get to the Mac Pros that have got 4 times the amount of GPU cores and 4 times the amount of CPU cores, and I guess maybe 4 times the bandwidth, are we going to have 1.2 terabytes a second of bandwidth on those things? That's insane. And next, let's get into your iCave answers, and the first one comes from Team Kinetix. iCave answers, there's a rumour and speculation with the new MacBook models and colours next year. Could Apple be changing the look of the MacBook lineup? MacBook, just MacBook, with colours, retina screen, white bezels, etc. Then slightly increased price to the Air, super thin and light mini LED screen, and MagSafe. Then the Pro models that launched this month at the top end. Having the MacBook Air and the 13-inch Pro both for sale makes no sense. The 13-inch Pro could be laid to rest and replaced by a fancy Air. Yeah, this is one of the things that we've been talking about, the rumours for a MacBook, just MacBook, not MacBook Air. I think it's the same thing. I don't think there's going to be 2 models. I don't think we're going to have MacBook Air, MacBook, and MacBook Pro. And if we do, what order do they go in? This is something we've talked about in the past, because originally the MacBook was the very cheap one. The MacBook Air was the super premium one. I think it was more expensive than the MacBook Pro at the time when it launched originally, because it was so thin and light. And then the MacBook Pro was the powerhouse, but it was chunky. And we've definitely gone back to a chunky MacBook Pro. So, I mean, we could be getting 3 different models. I would hope, though, if they were going to do that, that the MacBook Nothing would be the budget model. Maybe that's what replaces the current Air with a flatter design. We have seen some flat design language stuff. Don't know 100% what's coming yet, but there have definitely been leaks. I think, though, we're going to just get a lightweight MacBook, whether it's called a MacBook or a MacBook Air, and then the chunky boy MacBook Pros. So that's my thought, is that we're just going to get those 2 models. But yes, I completely agree. There's no real reason for the 13-inch MacBook Pro anymore. It should really just be MacBook cheaper and MacBook expensive. That would make all the sense in the world. John Malkin asks, I gave answers, do you think the next MacBook Air will be following the new MacBook Pro design or iPad design language? I don't remember any of the renders that nailed the design of the new Pro. No, you're right, there weren't any, which is weird because we were shown the exact drawings by those leaks from the Russian hackers that attacked Quadracomputer, I think it was called, the company that basically manufactures them. The leaked designs were exactly what we got. They'd got the curve to the bottom, they'd got the thicker, chunky sides, and I kind of discounted that as being, oh, maybe this is just like a patent application and they've just used a thicker design. But no, those exact designs that we had coming out were leaked. Just that nobody seems to have rendered them. Very strange. I don't know. I don't know if we're going to go iPad Pro. I think all the design language kind of sits together still. You have still got the flat sides. It has got the curve to the bottom. I think we maybe will get like a chamfered curve to the bottom of these things and a nice flat top. I think that's probably the way that it's going to go. And renders by Apple Tomorrow on the screen. I think he's pretty much nailed it here. And mine Deutschkurs asks, I gave answers. I just installed Monterey and opened displays to share the touchpad and keyboard with all my other Monterey Macs. What do you think? When will this be available? So this question is about that magical universal control that was demonstrated at WWDC for the Mac OS Monterey, and it's not been in any of the betas. It has been referenced and there has been code for it in the betas, but it hasn't been enabled by default. There have been some kind of workarounds where you could kind of turn it on, but then I think it was only working between Macs, and I don't think it was working with iPads because the iPads didn't have that bit of code in there in the beta software either. So my thoughts is that we will see it enabled probably in 15.2. I think 15.1 is already in testing, and I don't think it's in there. I think it'll be in 15.2, and I think it will probably be around about mid-November that we actually get access in general as the public to that feature. I'm really excited for it because I do work between my iPad and my Mac quite a lot. Most of the time I'll use my iPad to just have things like YouTube going in the background if I want to focus on something a bit more on the screen. On my Mac, if I'm doing Photoshop that needs the full display. But to be fair, I have a 40-inch TV, 40-inch 4K TV on my desk, so normally I'm not running out of screen space. And that'll do it for today's show. As I say, we will be doing our unboxing and a formal mini review of the AirPods Generation 3 when they arrive later today. I'm also filming some stuff around the office, finally getting to the point where this kind of makeover of the office is done. I do want to thank FlexiSpot for the new desk, which is actually what everything is now connected to for this video. So the camera is attached to the back of it above the monitor and things like that. So we're getting there. I just want to make sure that it looks really good. Cable management got sorted yesterday to as good of a degree as I can with a moving desk. Makes it quite tricky. But yeah, we're getting there. Finally. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.